Okay, thank you very much. Today I'm going to talk about Yugoslav football clubs touring UK and interwar period. I have to say that this is still an ongoing research because I only had the opportunity to see Yugoslav sources and some of the British sources, some of the newspapers, but after I hopefully manage to scan some of the British sources, it will develop into a full-scale academic paper. So let's begin. Before the Second World War, football contacts between Yugoslavia and United Kingdom were weak and sporadic, and British seamen used to play matches in Yugoslav coastal towns, attracting large crowds. Also during the First World War, several matches had been played between Serbian and British regimental teams, especially on the Salonika front, and Serbian refugee children who were educated in the United Kingdom during the war had the opportunity to watch football and to play with their schoolmates. Still, Yugoslav and British football were two different worlds, and nevertheless, during the entire interwar period, Yugoslavs admired the British for their passion for the game, for the organization of their clubs, and for the importance football had in their social life. Yugoslav sports newspapers were full of reports from matches of English and Scottish championships. Football enthusiasts had their favorite teams. The advantages and disadvantages of WM formation were discussed, etc. Yugoslav football public always wanted to see a direct confrontation between the two football cultures, especially after 1930 and the World Cup in Uruguay, where Yugoslavia made a significant international breakthrough. But because of different circumstances, this simply wasn't possible until late 1930s, when two enthusiastic Yugoslav clubs decided to try to organize tours of the British Isles. And those two clubs were Gradjanski from Zagreb and Yugoslavia from Belgrade. Gradjanski was one of the most successful Yugoslav football clubs, and it always was very much focused on international success, appearing in Mitropa Cup and playing numerous international friendlies as well. But the pinnacle of Gradjanski's international success in those years was the match against Liverpool, played in Zagreb in spring of 1936. A guy called David Weiss, who was a sports journalist for Vienna Sportstagblatt, a sports newspaper, and also a football agent, and who had very strong contacts in Yugoslav football, managed to agree the visit of Liverpool FC to Zagreb. And this match, played in front of the crowd of about 20,000 people, the largest ever seen at Gradjanski new stadium, was one of the biggest victories achieved by Yugoslav club over any European side. Gradjanski managed to beat Liverpool by 5-1, and the fans which crowded the Gradjanski stadium in record numbers were more than ecstatic. The match also had a very positive financial effect as well, especially because the club at that time was struggling financially. Yugoslav press reported that Liverpool's defeat in Zagreb was the first ever in the continent. Now, I don't know whether that was true, but it also had a very, very strong impact on football fans in Yugoslavia. And as it happened, the Liverpool Football Club management wanted the opportunity for a rematch and invited Gradjanski to visit England later that year. Gradjanski officials accepted the invitation, eventually arranged a 14-day tour of the United Kingdom to be held in November 1936. Now, this proposed tour was also arranged by journalist and agent David Weiss with the help of English referee called Walter Lewington, who apparently acted as Weiss's partner and agent for United Kingdom. And this tour represented a huge opportunity for Gradjanski to make an international name for himself, but it was not just that. Apart from the promotional value of the tour, the new club management, led by well-known and respected Hungarian coach called Martin Bukovi, saw the tour as a chance to observe and learn the new techniques and tactics implemented by British football clubs. Bukovi was a typical protege of a Central European school of football, emphasizing the importance of passing and technique, but he was also keen to learn and was aware of the potential positive influences of the tactical firmness which was characteristic for British football clubs. He was particularly interested to see how the Herbert Chapman's WM tactic was working in practice. This miraculous tactic was praised by continental journalists, but was rarely put to practice by coaches and managers. However, despite the big desire to go to United Kingdom, Gradjanski first had to overcome several organizational obstacles. First, the tour was supposed to be held during the finishing rounds of the autumn part of the Yugoslav Football Championship. And this part of championship was crucial for any club with ambitions to win it, as it represented qualifications for the spring playoffs. The Yugoslav FA had a firm policy not to allow clubs to postpone their championship matches because of friendly games or tours. And generally, Gradjanski wouldn't have had problems with this, as they had about 40 players registered for the first team, and the second lineup could cover for the national championship games while the first team was away on the tour. But in 1936-1937 season, Gradjanski was, for the first time in many years, very close to becoming a champion. If the first team wasn't able to play for 2 or 3 rounds, this title run could have been over for them. And this problem made some of the members of the board to ask the agents to try to postpone the tour, but it wasn't possible. Eventually, the board of directors decided to send the first team to United Kingdom, hoping that the reserves will withstand the pressure. Also, as it was customary for international tours, Gradjanski had invited several players of other clubs to join the tour. This also helped to ease the pressure of the players who stayed at home and continued to struggle for the championship title. The second big problem was to get approval from the authorities to travel. First, they had to apply for permission with the Yugoslav FA, and the Yugoslav FA usually didn't object to such schemes as long as the national competition calendar wasn't disturbed. The club had to send all the details: who was going to travel abroad, which cities are they going to visit, against whom will they play, how much money was expected as profit, etc. As usual, the Yugoslav FA did not make many problems and gave official permission to Gradjanski, but rather late in the entire process, only in October of 1936. And it is not clear whether there was some sort of a hold-up with the Yugoslav FA or Gradjanski simply submitted the application late. The second stage of the process was to get permission from the Yugoslav Ministry of the Physical Education. Now, this was slightly a bigger problem, as the ministry was scanning such proposed tours for potential political subversion. But in this case, everything went rather smoothly, and relying on the positive assessment by the Yugoslav FA, the Ministry of Physical Education approved the proposed tour. And their positive opinion was sent to the Zagreb city police authorities so they could make passports for Gradjanski players and other members of the delegation. Gradjanski set on their journey on 5th of November 1936 from Zagreb Central Railway Station. A few hundred of their fans gathered at the station to wish them farewell. They traveled by train to Calais, and then by boat to Dover, by train from Dover to London, and by train from London to Liverpool. And after many difficulties, especially heavy storm in the English Channel and missing their train in London railway station, they reached Liverpool on 9th of November 1936, early in the morning. They were rather tired and exhausted, by the way. And on their way, they played 2 training matches in Switzerland, beating St. Gallen and losing to FC Basel. They had a terrible misfortune that during the training match, they lost one of the best players, fullback Gustav Lechner, to an injury. However, even this misfortune, although seriously diminishing their chances for accomplishing good results, proved to have a silver lining, because during their visits to top British clubs, Lechner was used as a sort of a guinea pig for the hosts to show latest techniques in the field of sports medicine and physiotherapy. In Liverpool, Gradjanski players first rested a bit and then went to pay their respects to British soldiers who died in the Great War, laying flowers at the Liverpool cenotaph. And in the afternoon, they had a training session in Liverpool Stadium. They were quite delighted with the stadium and with the training facilities, as most of them had never seen anything like that before. The training session had a good night rest helped them to recuperate and prepare for the match. Also, during the evening, they received a telegram with encouraging words from the club's president. And although it sounded a bit pathetic and kind of nationalist, it says, "Hold on there, never forget that you're Croats," it gave the players, by their own testimony, a massive boost of confidence. The match between Liverpool FC and Gradjanski was played in very bad weather in front of 10,000 spectators. Gradjanski tried very hard to put up a fight, but they only managed to lose 4-1. Liverpool was clearly the better team, but Gradjanski was still competitive in the first half, losing it only 1-0. But beside being tired from the long journey, they had a bit of bad luck as well, as one of the most important players, called Toni Pogačnik, got injured in 25 minutes into the game. And for the most part of the second half, Gradjanski only played with 10 men on the pitch. The reporters agreed that Gradjanski goalkeeper called Emil Urh saved the team from experiencing a heavier defeat. Also, the British press concluded that despite the heavy loss, Gradjanski was an excellent team. And after the match, Liverpool Football Club organized a banquet for the guests, and apparently a lot of drinking and singing took place. The next match of the Gradjanski tour was a match against Doncaster Rovers, which was the bottom team of the second division at the time. And Yugoslav football public expected a comfortable win, but that didn't happen. In fact, Gradjanski was unpleasantly surprised by a 6-4 defeat. Yugoslav footballers had underestimated Doncaster, who played fast and through the wings, creating chances easily. And Yugoslav footballers were quite surprised with the fact that there wasn't much difference, by their opinion, in quality and approach to the game between the teams of first and second division. And of course, after the match, the day ended with a banquet. The best performance of Gradjanski in the entire tour happened in Edinburgh, in the match against Heart of Midlothian. In front of 10,000 people at Tynecastle Stadium, Gradjanski had control of most of the match, creating chances and scoring goals. The first half ended up with 3-1 lead for Gradjanski. In the second half, Scottish players showed more initiative and managed to score a goal from a dubiously awarded penalty kick. Gradjanski once more extended their lead, but Hearts players pushed as hard as they could, and in the end, the final result was 4-4. The game was very entertaining, and both teams was very satisfied in the end. And Ljubomir Vukadinovic, who was a prominent Yugoslav sports journalist who accompanied Gradjanski on the tour, later wrote that the match against Hearts was one of the most exciting in his entire career. The day ended with a banquet, of course, and stars of the banquet were Tommy Walker, who was a prominent Hearts player, who entertained the guests by singing Scottish folk songs, and apparently the club chairman accompanied him on the piano. After Edinburgh, Gradjanski travelled to Wolverhampton, where they stayed for a few days. The match between Wolverhampton Wanderers and Gradjanski was played in a very heavy fog in front of only 2,000 spectators. In fact, the fog was so thick that the referee thought of postponing the match, but Gradjanski officials urged him to proceed because they couldn't have stayed in West Midlands as they had arrangements made for a match in London. The match ended up with 4-2 victory for the Wanderers, but that is all the Yugoslav reporter could actually telephone back to his office in Yugoslavia. To his own confession, the fog was such that he couldn't even see who scored the goals, let alone what was the match like. And the final match of the tour was played in London at Upton Park. West Ham United hosted Gradjanski in front of only 2,000 people, and this was, by unanimous verdict of both journalists and players, the worst performance of Gradjanski in the entire tour. West Ham won by 1-0 by an accidental fluke shot in the 5th minute of the match. And the rest of the game was quite boring and without any proper chances. Besides the matches played during the tour, Gradjanski delegation visited several other football clubs and watched a few championship matches. They visited Everton, Aston Villa and Arsenal, and had the opportunity to watch matches between Liverpool and Sheffield Wednesday and Aston Villa and Blackburn Rovers. The reporter who followed Gradjanski on their tour described Villa Park as a castle from a fairy tale. The players and the members of the delegation were particularly impressed with what they saw at Arsenal: modern stadium, top-level facilities, and orthopedic infirmary, something that was simply unimaginable in Yugoslavia. Gradjanski delegation also used the opportunity to see sights of London and to visit Madame Tussauds. No, that's the next one. Okay. According to the Yugoslav press and according to the testimonies of Gradjanski players who were involved in the tour, they gave the best they could in all the matches, and the club officials agree that the overall performance was good, that Gradjanski did not give up in any of the matches, and generally that they were very, very much satisfied with the tour. But unfortunately, the fans were not very satisfied because they expected a positive result. They expected the final balance sheet to be positive on the side, and it was very symptomatic that about the same number of people who escorted them on their journey actually greeted them back, despite the fact that they promised a very pompous ceremony upon their return. Okay, the second tour I'm going to talk about, it's much shorter, and I will finish soon, is the tour of Football Club Yugoslavia touring Ireland in 1937. They were encouraged by the relative success of Gradjanski tour, and they decided to embark on a similar project. In spring of 1937, Yugoslavia from Belgrade hired the same agents to arrange them a tour of the British Isles, and they soon proposed a visit to Ireland, where Yugoslavia was supposed to play against the team of Irish Free State. and London, where Yugoslavia's opponent was supposed to be Chelsea. The club officials accepted the proposal, and the tour was set for March 1937. They had to pass all the same administrative obstacles as Gradjanski, like I told before. And there were also no problems with that, which was quite strange, considering the fact that this was a visit of a Yugoslav football club to Irish Free State, especially a team like Yugoslavia. And as I mentioned before, Yugoslavia was a very weird kind of team. They were a left-wing team. Some of their players actually fought in the Spanish, escaped the country to fight in Spanish Civil War. So it was kind of a politically provocative to go to Ireland at that time, especially because the Yugoslav officials and Yugoslav government want to maintain very good relations with the UK. That was their top priority at the time, because they were losing their support from France. But that's a different story. But like I said, nevertheless, there were no problems with authorities. The only problem, as it would later turn out, would be the case of false advertising of the match. And apparently both sides had announced their opponents falsely. The Irish had advertised him as the Yugoslav national football team, and the Yugoslav described their opponents as Irish national football team, even though they were in fact selected team of the Irish Football League. And after their return to Yugoslavia, the club had certain difficulties in explaining this issue to the Yugoslav FA. Later on, they were punished because they were accused of falsely identifying themselves as Yugoslavia national football team. But I think that they didn't have any bad intention. It's simply the name of the club and the name of the country is practically the same. Yeah, okay. They started their journey on 13th of March 1937, and a few hundred of their supporters escorted them from the Belgrade railway stations. They also traveled by train to Calais. They took a boat to London, train to a small place in Wales where there are ferries to Dublin, and they I can't read it. They reached Dublin on 16th of March, very early in the morning, and interestingly, just see, yeah, this is the journey. Okay. And interestingly, on March the 16th, in the morning, they were scheduled to meet with Imon de Valera, who was at that time president of the Executive Council of the Irish Free State. The meeting was short and cordial, and no political issues were mentioned. He welcomed the players, wished them luck at the match, and said that sport is truly a magnificent tool of bringing people and nations together. Now, the Yugoslav delegation was very much impressed with him and his performance. At the same afternoon, Yugoslav footballers were invited to tea to the residency of the Lord Mayor of Dublin. The players remembered that Lord Mayor Alfie Byrne was very warm-hearted and friendly, and at their departure, each of the players was given a box of chocolates and a pack of cigarettes. In the evening, players visited the Yugoslav consulate in Dublin for a short reception. The match between Yugoslavia and the team of Irish First League was scheduled for 17th of March, the St. Patrick Day, and was in fact part of the celebration activities. On the morning of the same day, the Irish Army had a parade on the streets of Dublin with Yugoslavia players as special guests. The Chief of Staff of the Irish Army, who commanded the parade, was a special guest at the later match, and even went to the dressing rooms during the halftime to greet all the players, which was, by my opinion, quite weird, but okay. The match between the two teams was scheduled for 3:30 p.m., and it attracted a considerable crowd of 30,000 people. The match was very lively and interesting. Yugoslavia took an early lead, but the Irish did not despair and attacked in order to equalize, which they soon managed to do. Both teams played very openly and with desire to score as many goals as possible, and the audience approved such an approach. And before halftime, Yugoslav team once again took the lead, and unfortunately for them, but also for the game itself, Yugoslavia was rather handicapped in the second half, as one of the centre halves of the team was injured. Also, some 20 minutes before the end, another Yugoslav player took a hit, disabling him to put his full performance. In addition to that, the Irish showed great desire to overturn the result, and in the end, they succeeded in doing so. The final result was 3-2 for the Irish. After the match, the Football Association organized a banquet in honor of the guests from Yugoslavia, and among many courteous words, one could have heard a lot of genuine praise for the performance of the Yugoslavs. Unfortunately for Yugoslavia, that was their final match of that tour, because the match against Chelsea did not happen, as Chelsea tried to change their financial agreement they previously had, and because the agents of Yugoslavia did not want to accept that, they had to return to Yugoslavia. They did play one match in France, but generally this tour was considered to be a bust. But the officials of the club actually considered this match in Ireland to be very successful, as it introduced the Yugoslav team to Irish and British football fans and sporting press, but also from the financial point of view, as the club earned a very hefty sum of money, some 45,000 dinars, which is quite a lot of money in those days. So to conclude, what were the consequences of these tours of Yugoslav teams undertook? Now, despite the fans not being happy with the results, I would say that the consequences were significant, far-reaching. First, Marton Bukovi, the head coach of Gradjanski, started to implement WM formation in Yugoslav football, which led Gradjanski to the championship title in 1936-37 season, and making the team dominant force in Yugoslav football until the breakup of the country in 1941. Also, Bukovi adopted WM formation and created a sort of a hybrid, the so-called WW formation, or 4-2-4 formation. And because of the fact that in the 1950s he worked as an assistant to Gustav Sebesh, the coach of Hungarian national football team, his tactical ideas were widely accepted by the Hungarian team, one of the best football teams in world history. As for Yugoslavia and their Irish tour, the immediate impact was probably... As for the Yugoslavia team and their Irish tour, their immediate impact was probably not very much visible, but the match against the Irish gave the team much needed confidence and affirmation, assuring them they could compete on the highest level. And a few years after the Irish tour, Yugoslavia did host Chelsea in Belgrade and managed to beat them 6-1. And in May 1939, in a historical match that was played in Belgrade, the first ever match between Yugoslav and English national football teams, Yugoslavia managed to win 2-1. And out of 11 Yugoslav players on the pitch, 5 of them were the ones who visited UK and Ireland during 1936 and 37. Thank you.
Questions, Paul?
Thank you, Dejan. That was fascinating as well, but obviously mentions what I was talking about. One thing I'm not sure about, you mentioned the Yugoslav players managing to escape. What was the nature of the Yugoslav government in the interwar period? Was it...
Well, in 1929, after the assassination of the leaders of the Croatian opposition in the parliament, there was a sort of a coup d'etat by the king, who enforced his own personal dictatorship. After he was killed in 1934, there was a gradual democratization, but the thing is, the Yugoslav interwar politics was always very anti-communist, so basically, when the civil war in Spain started, the government refused to issue passports to people who wanted to travel to Spain. So, when I say escape, I mean, for instance, if somebody wanted to go to Spain to fight for the Republicans, he couldn't say that. He had to say something like, okay, I'm going to France to work, I don't know, to pick oranges or something like that, and then go from France to Spain. So when I say escape, I mean that. I mean, during that entire period, there was no diplomatic relations with Soviet Union. People from Soviet Union couldn't come to Yugoslavia. Yugoslavs couldn't travel to Soviet Union as well.
But Yugoslavia generally free to travel?
Generally free, but you would have to submit your request to travel to police authorities, and police authorities would then issue a passport. You didn't have a passport of your own constantly. You would have to ask for it for a specific mean. It wasn't much of a problem. They would usually just give it to you, but in certain times when some political crisis had been happening in Europe, they were much more suspicious, and they would check, okay, who you are. I mean, especially because a lot of those people who wanted to go to Spain to fight for the Republicans already had some sort of a political background of political, I don't know, a confrontation with the authorities. They would either be arrested for their left-wing activities or something like that.
I've got one.
Yeah.
Why was it so important to have these connections?
Because of the prestige, that's number one. Like I said, the image of British football was almost, I don't know, divine. Maybe it's because the very fact that there can be 100,000 people attending a football match in England was something unimaginable to people in Yugoslavia. The entire capital of Belgrade at the end of the First World War didn't have 100,000 people. The stories they've been reading, the stories they've been hearing from people who traveled and who watched these matches was something, so England, especially England, but not just England, generally England and Scotland would consider to be the best of the best in football. So, and because of the very competitive streak, they wanted to prove that they were better from the best. That was one reason. And the second reason, so basically the team that would tour England or beat an English club would be considered to be the best team in Yugoslavia, despite all the national championships and things like that. All of those clubs played against very, very formidable continental sides. They played against German teams. Gradjanski managed to beat Barcelona. They managed to beat Athletic Bilbao. Yugoslavia managed to beat Ambrosiana Internazionale Milan. But that was not that. They wanted to beat the English team. The second thing was money, because they always thought that, especially touring UK, if you go and play against a team and 100,000 people come, and if you get half of the profits, then you will get a lot of money. So that was the motive as well.
Got one last
Little question. Okay. Given how football was divine, did British coaches go to Yugoslavia?
Yeah, some of them, but in very, very. The Gradjanski team had actually two coaches from UK and Ireland. There was a guy called Arthur Gaskell, I think. I managed to find that it was in very early 1920s. I think he was somehow related to Bolton Wanderers. I don't know whether as a player or as some member of the staff, but he did not last long, and he was kind of a wanderer. He later on coached in Romania, in Turkey, in Russia, and places like that. And there was also an Irish guy, can't remember his name now. I have to look it up and I will tell you, who also worked as a coach at Gradjanski for a short period of time. The thing is, Yugoslav clubs could not afford to pay a lot of money for their staff. First of all, amateurism was still officially in charge in Yugoslavia. The football clubs could not pay either coaching staff nor players. The players actually had to pay their membership fee in order to. That was, of course, bypassed by different means, but officially it was there. So they could not pay a lot of money, and English coaches, basically are the most expensive ones on the market. A lot of foreign coaches did go to Yugoslavia, especially from Hungary, like I said, Martin Bukovi, from Germany. Mostly Hungary, Germany, Czechoslovakia. They came to Yugoslavia to coach.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.